Right.
The Indianapolis Colts have an open competition at quarterback this offseason. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com. And my partner, Jake Arthur, is our credentialed Crocs on the site. You got your Crocs on right now, Jake?
I never have Crocs. You just say it every time.
We're going to get you some Crocs one of these off seasons here. But today we are talking all about the NFL Combine. We haven't had the workouts at all today or any of the interviews or anything so far, but we did get to hear from Indianapolis Colts general manager Chris Ballard earlier this evening. So we're going to look at some of Chris Ballard's comments here in the presser, and then we're going to preview some of the first position groups that are going to be working on the field on Thursday, and also the guys we're going to talk to tomorrow, which is defensive line and linebacker. So let's kick it off with this Chris Ballard press conference, a press conference that many have described as a disaster for whatever reason. I guess that's what the sentiment is on social media right now, is people calling the Chris Ballard press conference a disaster and a whole lot of nothing and a lot of, a whole lot of talking about his days with the Bears and stuff like that, which I guess he talked about Johnny Knox, which is fun. Like I love Johnny Knox. So, but yeah, one thing he did say a couple other things though that I thought were intriguing, and I wouldn't really call it a disaster. And one of the big things obviously is continuing that rhetoric on the open competition at quarterback. Now, I'm going to give you the floor here in a second, Jake, but to me, a lot of this is lip service. I don't think there's really much of a competition at quarterback. And maybe if there was an option out there to give competition at quarterback, like maybe there were even like a Sam Darnold, like last year level free agent, maybe you can have a competition, but the options are so bare that like whoever you bring in, if you try to sell that as a competition to people this offseason, everyone's going to look at you like, come on, like, Zach Wilson, the competition. Like I really, Daniel Jones, that's what Dustin says in the, Daniel Jones, real big competition, I think it's a lot of lip service. I think it's a lot of just preaching this to everyone on the team, which is like, no one's job is safe, which I think is perfectly fine, So I think it's fine to push this, but in reality, I don't think this is like a real open competition for the Colts this offseason.
Yeah, I don't think this changed much for me in terms of how I see them approaching the quarterback position this offseason. I still think like highest outside scenario you could shoot for is probably like Justin Fields.
But even then, just the price tag, like,
I don't think Sam Darnold is not a thing. I don't think they're going to try and trade for Matthew Stafford.
Nope.
Like I think you're still looking at like a mid-level, okay level person to bring in.
Yeah.
Like you're probably looking at the Joe Flacco, Gardner Minshew level of quarterbacks again, but maybe with someone with a little more juice.
Yeah.
But basically, I think they just want to keep Anthony from being complacent. And I don't really think it's as much about Anthony as much as it is just the quarterback position in general. Like, I think they're very well aware this isn't the offseason to need to try and change your franchise quarterback. That's just not an option for them right now.
Right.
But they need to, if it's not Anthony, because like, let's say he plays spectacular. He has been injury prone. They have to prepare for that. So they just want in any game, all 17 games, maybe into the postseason, if something miraculous happens, they want to have a playable quarterback each and every week.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be someone on the tier of like a Daniel Jones. It'll be someone like a Mac Jones or a Trey Lance who kind of fits that same archetype to be the backup behind Richardson. But if we're talking like true competition, that's just not out there this offseason. Right. Maybe you take a guy in the draft, but even if you take a guy like in round 4 or 5, that's not really going to push your former 4th overall pick.
Right.
And unless the guy is just Brock Purdy from day one, which is unlikely,
Yeah, that's lightning in a bottle. You can only kind of hope to make that happen. But yeah, I think the biggest deal here is hearing QB competition. Like you immediately see two guys going head to head throughout training camp, and they're not being like a leader in the doghouse or in the clubhouse until late in the summer. And I don't know if that's going to be the case. Like, I think Anthony is going to be every opportunity to retain being the starter. He just better not slip up is the thing.
Yeah, I think that's more of what it was. It's like, Anthony, your job is not guaranteed. We
Right.
need to kind of show you the leash, or show you, like, with the horse racing or whatever, show them the whip a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of what it is, It's like, it's kind of like a soft threat to him in terms of, you don't take this serious, we will get someone in here who can play. But for the most part, it's going to be his job. But
Yeah.
quarterback comments aside, because to me, again, it's a whole lot of kind of nothing to me here. Even when Ballard's trying to push this competition thing, the more eye-opening comments were his comments about upcoming free agents, or even guys on the roster, and what it means for their status going forward. So he did talk about how he's going to meet with Ryan Kelly's representatives later this week, and he's going to meet with Will Fries' representatives, I think, later this week or early next week, I believe.
Yeah.
And the tone on how he talked about those two guys when he did speak about meeting with the representatives with Fries, it felt like 100% they want him back, but it did seem like they'll play and they'll see how the price tag goes with that one there. With Kelly, you didn't really get as much of that. It was more so like, we're going to meet with him. Even when he said he met with him after the season, it was more so like non-football related.
Yeah.
So I don't have a vibe 100% in terms of where they feel about Kelly. Fries, I think they want him back, but I don't know if they're willing to go as high as what the price tag might be on the open market.
Yeah, I know they definitely want Fries back. I've, conversations like this where Chris is at a presser, and even like some kind of just shooting the ish stuff with people in the building, they want him back. I think it's totally a price thing. With the injury, you never know what the price tag is going to be on the open market, but Will Fries is like legitimately a top 10, top 15 offensive free agent this year.
Yeah.
Like, if his medical is clear, he's going to be coveted. I think the Colts want to be the ones to reap the rewards of that, because they drafted him in the 7th round. They developed him. They believed in him. They let him start. They don't want to let that kind of player go, but there probably is a hard line of which they're willing to pay. And they have 3 offensive linemen in flux. They have like 65% of their offensive line is a question mark right now. I think a lot of it depends on each other. What they're going to do with Ryan Kelly or Braden Smith or Will Fries depends on what they're going to do with each of the others. So I think for the right price, they would like them back. Now, with Ryan Kelly, we have gotten answers at this press conference before in years past on whether or not they're going to move on from guys, or at least like reading the tea leaves, we could get that. Like, we knew in the past, like Eric Ebron wasn't going to come back. Like Frank Gore wasn't going to come back.
Gardner Minshew
wasn't going to come
back.
back. And when I asked Chris about Ryan Kelly, I said, it's been a while now. Have you guys met and kind of decided which way you're going to go? And, he said they're not yet. That's next week. I get the vibe. It's more, the door's not closed, but like
it's not very open.
Right. Like Ryan, go out there and find what's on the market for you. Let us know if the situation is right for us. Maybe we can do it, but like, I don't think he's a huge priority for them, but I don't think the door is closed.
Yeah.
And like you have mentioned to me off air, they did talk about Tanner Bortolini's versatility of playing guard perhaps too. It's like, we know it easily makes sense for Bortolini to be that replacement, but he might need to be the replacement for Will Fries. We don't know.
Right. Yeah. You never really know there. And real quick before we got the segment here, Jake, 2 other guys that kind of have their future up in the air a little bit right now. I feel like we got a little bit more clarity on both of them. Right tackle Braden Smith, who is currently under contract and on the roster. To me, I know a lot of people are taking this press conference as him being back, but to me, I didn't view it that way at all. The way I kind of viewed it was he's unlikely to be back. And I'll let you kind of further go into that in a second here, Jake. And then Samson Ebukam, I feel like this press conference gave us a lot of insight into he'll probably be back. He brought up Ebukam multiple times unprompted when asked about Lou Anarumo and the defense. So it feels like it's very likely he'll be back, which I think is kind of a crazy decision given the Achilles injury and his age. But Samson Ebukam, I think, will be back. Braden Smith, based off this press conference, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, so with Braden, real quick, Chris said he's healthy and he wants to play football. But the question was, do you see him being a part of this team? Braden's under contract right now.
Yeah.
If he was going to be a part of the team, Chris could have said, yeah, he's under contract. That he feels good now. He wants to play football. Let's ride. That wasn't the answer.
Nope.
He said he's healthy or he's feeling good. He wants to play football, and we're going to work through that. Now he's due nearly $20 million this year.
Right.
And had personal issues, which, he's allowed to have. That's not the thing here, but this is a business. So they have decisions to make of, is this guy ready to get $20 million from us this year? So I think that's up in the air. Like Ebukam, you mentioned, that's tough because Dio is also a free agent. So it's like, why are you going to do that? But we had a little sidebar with Chris Ballard after his presser. I got the impression that they want to keep Dio, again, probably for the right price. Dio has position versatility, and in the NFL right now, that can command a lot of money. But, it's kind of the same thing with Will Fries. They took a chance on him. They drafted him and developed him. Chris said at his career trajectory right now, he's pretty much where they wanted him to be.
Yeah.
And so why would you let that walk out the door?
Yeah. My only quick comment with that, though, is you got to free up some money somewhere. Where's this big free agency they're going to have if they're going to be keeping all these guys? So we'll see. But that's all we have talking to Chris Ballard in free agency for now. We are going to transition more into draft talk because it's combine week. It's time to talk about these players. We get to talk to defensive linemen and linebackers tomorrow for interviews in the morning, and then they work out on Thursday evening. So coming up, we're going to talk about defensive linemen that have caught our eyes so far and that we're really excited to watch here at the combine these next couple days. All righty, Jake, we are back from that long break there and talking all about these defensive linemen that have caught our eye so far. Some of these guys are Senior Bowl guys, so some guys that you've been able to see up close this draft season when you were down in Mobile. Some other guys who I think are very, very good players just on film in general. So I've got my handful of guys, but Jake, who are the guys that you're really looking at defensive line? Maybe not particularly as fits for the Colts, but just in general, guys that you really want to see have a big week here at the combine.
Yeah, and when I'm looking at players anymore, for the most part, I am looking through a Colts lens. Like, I kind of discount guys if they wouldn't fit with the Colts, but some that I do think would. Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College, I think makes a lot of sense. He's that bendy fastball off the edge that we know Chris Ballard covets, and always
long
likes.
Arms too. Yes, really long arms.
Oluwafemi Oladejo from UCLA. This fits the Ballard vein in that he is a position switch.
Yep.
He spent time at UCLA earlier in his career as a linebacker, a guy who could rush off the edge, blitz a little bit. But in 2024, that's basically what he did, was rush the passer, and he did it really well.
Yeah.
So he's young to the edge position, which we know Chris likes that too. If you've made a position switch for some reason, that really does it for him. Aeneas Peebles, that was a interior Senior Bowl standout. And then Derek Harmon, big boy. I know you're looking for some beef up front, so
yes,
he fits the bill for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm very much looking at some beef up front for the Colts, especially if that third defensive tackle.
Yes.
When you look at Lou Anarumo's system, there's going to be a lot more two-gapping. They're going to be asking guys to control their gaps and let these linebackers roam free and make those tackles for a loss. And while I think Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner are just fantastic players in their own right, and they can certainly operate in this type of scheme, I want that rotational guy to be a big boy. I want like 330, 340, maybe 350, maybe 360, 370. Let's get like 400.
Do you want a bear or like a real bear?
I just want a roadblock to put in the middle of the defensive line that won't move. And maybe that's because these last couple seasons I've been seeing Taven Bryan playing one tech. I've been seeing Raekwon Davis playing one tech. I've been seeing Adetomi Adebawore playing one tech. And these guys are traffic cones out there. They are guys getting driven off the line. I just want a guy who can eat their gap, who can hold their space, and just do some really good things there on that defensive line. So I'm looking at a guy like Yaya Black from Iowa, a 330-pound guy, Kenneth Grant from Michigan. I mean, you'd have to take him at 14 and hope he gets on that Dexter Lawrence career plan, because this is a 340-pound guy who
Vita Vea even.
Yeah, Vita Vea. But this is a 340-pound guy who doesn't really have the production in college, but like if it clicks for him, he's got the athletic tools. Jamari Caldwell from Oregon, more of a rotational guy. Walter Nolan, I know he's a little bit smaller, but just the athletic traits there.
Yeah.
Like, I just want more juice at defensive tackle, more juice and size from that third defensive tackle. And I think people don't realize too, when we're talking about this third defensive tackle, if the Colts cut Raekwon Davis and let Taven Bryan walk, there's nearly 700 snaps at defensive tackle being vacated. And that's counting on Buckner and Grover to play almost all the games. So if these guys are even just relatively healthy and they do miss a couple games, you're going to need that third defensive tackle to step up and play some real snaps. So it can't be a guy like Taven Bryan. It can't be a guy like Raekwon Davis, but maybe you get in a Yaya Black or a Jamari Caldwell in those middle rounds, and they can give you some good snaps there as that third defensive tackle. So like a guy like Caldwell, for instance, from Oregon, like 6'1", 330 pounds, just a lightning bug too on the interior. Like that's a guy I'm really looking at for the Indianapolis Colts. I think he's going to test fantastic this week. If you watch him on film, I think this week's going to be a good week for him in terms of testing. So those are the guys I got my eye on at defensive tackle. The other one I really want to throw out here, Jake, is because I think if he's there at 14, just knowing Chris Ballard and how he values the trenches and how this guy's young, he's super athletic, and that's Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. We talked about him recently on the show. 6'6", 280 pounds.
He's a big dude. 4
career sacks in college. Senior Bowl superstar this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it just screams so much Ballard. I'll say this. He's way more athletic than Dio.
Okay.
Dio's athletic, but this guy, he's going to run like 4.5, like high 4.4s. It's closer to Trayvon Walker to me.
Oh, okay.
And that's why he might go even higher than 14. So I'm telling you, man, like if he's there at 14, I could totally see the Colts falling in love, because I think it's going to be like one of those, like, we talk about RAS and the relative athletic score here. Mm-hmm. It's going to be like a 9.9, I think, or a 10 from him this week.
No, he's going to be good. He showed out at the Senior Bowl. He was another guy who did so well, didn't have to finish the rest of the week.
No.
Again, you mentioned how big he is, but he's bendy. He's very athletic too. He's bendy. He had a couple reps during 11 on 11s where he bent the edge from the right tackle and just torched the quarterback. And so guys like that, they can be fast, they can be explosive, but they're not always, they don't have that flexibility, but he does.
Yeah.
So he's super enticing. I'm with you. I can't, if his character checks out, which I don't know why it wouldn't, but like, that's the only thing that could maybe keep him from being like a top half of the first round pick. Like Chris is going to be really enticed to want that for sure.
Yeah. And then 2 other guys I really want to highlight, just because I think this is a big week for both of them for very different reasons. Darius Alexander from Toledo. He was a man amongst boys last year in college, quite literally 25 years old, playing against 20-year-olds, but had a fantastic year with Toledo.
Yeah.
Sorry, Yaya Black, I'm still thinking of, with Toledo. And he's an Indy native guy from around here, I think from Fort Wayne, Indiana there. And the Senior Bowl film was awesome. The college film was awesome. If he can just check that final box, like, I know he's an older guy, but that's a guy the Colts will certainly love, despite him being a little bit more undersized. And then another big boy here, Deion Walker from Kentucky.
Strength.
Yeah, I just want to see what the testing numbers look like with him, though, because if he can get around 5 seconds in that 40, which would be fantastic at 340.
Mm-hmm. Big dude.
Yeah, we're talking, a huge riser. I know the tape is inconsistent, the leverage is inconsistent in college, but if he can just hit those crazy testing numbers, and maybe, you said the strength, if the bench time, if the bench stuff is like great for him, we could see him really climb up.
40 reps.
Yeah. I know arm length is a big part of that as well, but I think that's another guy who could rise up and maybe be a guy for the Colts in that big boy vein that I'm looking for.
I'm with you. We've seen them go for kind of the tweener, like backup 3-tech guys. Like I'm ready for them to put just, again, a hog in there, get a bear and like one of these athletic dudes who has no business moving like he does at the size he is. And
right.
I'm with you on that.
Well, when we think about like Grover Stewart was like 320 coming out.
Yeah.
And they cut him down to 310 and now he's at like 305.
Yeah.
And you got that size and strength. And now you have this athletic beast too at 305. You can do that with these guys. You get them in at 340, get them down to like 320. They can still eat up the 2 gap and they can be like more athletic and better pass rushers as well. They don't have to be stuck at that weight forever, but I think it's easier for a guy to go from like a 340 to a 325 than it is from a guy to go from like 290 to 305. Like I think it's a lot easier, the transition, and you get to keep that athleticism or maybe add to that athleticism if they're just cutting some weight rather than gaining weight in the NFL.
Yeah, without a question. And Chris knows this is a deep group. He always loves the defensive line, but he identified this as a deep group as well. So be prepared for them to to kind of pull the weight on the defensive line. So coming up, guys, this is going to be, it's not a very heralded group of off-ball linebackers, but I like this group a lot, and they're very versatile, very explosive. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. All right, so linebackers are going to go as well. We're going to talk to these guys tomorrow. They're going to work out on Thursday. So we know the Colts are probably going to get a linebacker or two in the draft, or they at least ought to. They have Zaire Franklin as a starter at Mike, and Jalen Carlisle is pretty much penciled in as your will for now. We'll see what happens with EJ Speed, but they need to get a linebacker somewhere between round 3 to 6, probably.
Yeah.
So who are your favorites that you're looking at here?
Well, one thing I want to add is, we have a new scheme coming on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Lou Anarumo's coming in. And while I do think that might hurt some of the projection, as like Chris Ballard likes a 34-inch arm linebacker who tests out of this world, I'm not saying Anarumo wants short-armed bad athletes at linebacker, but you could see that archetype change a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I have noticed though with Lou Anarumo is all the linebackers that have really had success there at Cincy have been Senior Bowl guys. Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, Akeem Davis-Gaither. Those are kind of the same trends with the Colts in terms of, Bobby Okereke early on, Shaquille Leonard. Those were kind of big Senior Bowl guys as well. So I think we could see them go that Senior Bowl route. So I have my couple guys, but I'm actually going to kick it back to you, Jake, because of that Senior Bowl connection. I think that the Colts, if they do take a linebacker, it would be one of those guys that they really saw at the Senior Bowl that was like just doing everything they need in terms of coverage and blitzing. So who are some of your standouts at the Senior Bowl? I know you had a couple that really popped for you.
Yeah, so one guy I've talked about, I think every time I've mentioned linebackers in this draft, is Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon.
Oh, really? You're a fan of Jeffrey Bassa?
Yeah, news to you. Right?
Okay, yeah.
So former safety turned linebacker convert, just like Jalen Carlisle. But this dude is like he's your alpha dog type of linebacker, very vocal leader, explosive, rangy. I watch him and I see a clear fit with the Colts. Like he is a will linebacker through and through.
Yep.
Like I think he was the green dot and he called the defense for Oregon.
Oof.
But you look at him with the Colts and I see him lining up next to Zaire cleaning up all the stuff in the box and everything, and you just let Bassa fly around the field. Really good player in that regard. Jack Kaiser, going to be a day 3 pick somewhere. No idea where, but a nice homegrown story. He played for 1A Pioneer, won Mr. Football in Indiana, went to Notre Dame, played there a million years, was a standout at the Senior Bowl. Surprisingly enough for me, he's not a guy, he's not got great size, he's not got great athleticism, but he is a gamer.
Yeah.
The whistle goes and this guy is going to find a way to be around the ball, make plays. I was really pleased with him in coverage during the Senior Bowl. Not so much the deep downfield stuff, like Etienne turned him into a blender at one point, like getting him downfield, but like everything horizontal and in the box in coverage, he smothered him.
Yeah.
He stayed on guys the entire time. He was really good. Shamar James, I think he had one of the fastest GPS times there in Mobile. That's another mid-round guy who I think a lot of people are going to be excited about. Carson Schwessinger from UCLA. That'll be a tough name for us to say, but that's a good guy in coverage as well. And then Demetrius Knight. That's my guy who I liked him on film, and I don't know how he's going to test, but I want him to be so much better than I fear he might test. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like on film, he's not the fastest guy, but he's like my Denzel Perryman this year. Like he's always around the ball. He's a thumper. He's kind of got like an old school mentality, but he's not reckless. Like he can translate to the modern game where you're going to get called for a lot of penalties. Like his aren't that bad, but he's still a thumper. I just don't know how well he's going to test, but he's an older prospect too. And so we'll see how it goes. But that's a guy who I really want to test well.
Yeah, it's kind of disheartening, by the way, when we say older prospect, it just means that there's a 19 in the birth date. It means 1999, 1998, 1997, heaven forbid 1997. But that means the older prospects nowadays. I'm seeing guys with 2004 birthdays in this.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's killing me here. Wow. But one thing I do want to say about Jack Kaiser is I'm personally a guy who likes athletic linebackers. I love linebackers with super athletes. I love the long arm guys. So Kaiser is someone I would traditionally not be a big fan of. But the film and the Senior Bowl stuff was really good, and his eyes are really good. And I'm just begging him this week, just hit baseline numbers at the combine. Like, can you get me 50th percentile in the 40? Can you get me 40th percent?
Run jump like a 35 or something?
Yeah, like that's all I ask. Like, if you hit me bare minimums, I can fight for you. It's kind of what it's what we hear from scouts in draft rooms, though. Like, scouts doing jumping jacks because they hear a corner ran a 4.58. Like their 7th round corner that they really love ran a 4.58 instead of a 4.6. Because if they run that 4.6, we can't draft them. But 4.58, I can talk them into it. It's kind of stuff like that. Ballard's told stories about that in the past from his time with the Bears. That's kind of me with Kaiser, man. Like, just give me the baseline and I can fall for you. If you come out and run the 4.8, if you do what's the guy, the old linebacker for the Morrison? Was it
Antonio Morrison?
Yeah, if you do the Antonio Morrison, I can't fall for you, man. So I need, give me like a 4.6, maybe a 4. I could talk myself into a 4.7. If you hit a 4.8, though, I can't do it. I can't do it there. But 2 more linebackers I really want to hit on who I don't know if they're going to be Colts players because they might just go too high. But I think they are going to be the belle of the ball this week because, look, they're 1st-round picks. And that is Jalen Walker from Georgia and Jahad Campbell from Alabama. From everything I've heard about Jahad Campbell, we might be looking at historic combine week from him in terms of just 40-time explosiveness.
Spider chart's going to be a full circle.
And he's one of those guys, just like Jalen Walker as well, where you're going to put them at either edge or linebacker. And I think at either spot you put them, you're going to have this all-world athlete. So, I like both for the Colts. I really like Campbell for the Colts. Like, even at 14, I'd be a big fan of taking Campbell just because he's such a playmaker as a pass rusher and as a guy in coverage. And he's only 20. I think he's only 20 years old as well. Like, I'm a big fan of Campbell or Walker for the Colts, but I'm not even necessarily saying I want them to do well this week for the Colts. More so just I want to see someone put on a show, and we got to see that with Xavier Worthy last year and a couple other players. I think these are 2 guys who could put on a massive show this week and maybe solidify themselves as top 10, top 15 picks for other NFL teams, or maybe even for the Colts. Like, I mean, the Colts need a linebacker.
Yeah, and I'd love to do some. We got a bug making a guest appearance. I would love to do some poking around this week and see what like scouts or just anyone around feels about Jahad Campbell probably being, staying an off-ball linebacker, but being able to blitz with him. I get the vibe Jalen Walker might be kind of the inverse of that, where his home might be at edge, and then you deploy him into coverage and do some off-ball stuff with him occasionally. But I'm interested in that. I think regardless, either of those players would be great. Every single time I've asked or heard someone ask a new Colts affiliate, whether it's Chris Ballard or whoever, about Lou Anarumo, they have said that he is multiple. And this is the kind of player you get, guys like that. Yeah.
Just add talent. Add athletic talent, guys who can do multiple things. Like, I don't care if they're perfect. I don't care if they are perfect for one position. If they need to be at 2 positions, like, find roles for these guys. Let them be weapons. Let them be playmakers, and let's go from there. But I think Campbell and Walker are definitely my short list for who I like in round 1. But I just don't know if they're really the guys the Colts will go with. But I think they're going to have huge combine weeks. And heck, if they hit that 9 RAS like we've seen in the past, all of a sudden that's a Colts player. So we could definitely see it. But those are definitely linebackers to watch this week, not only in the interviews, but also in the workouts, especially in the workouts. I think they'll have a big week. But that's all we have for today, guys. We'll be back with you yet again tomorrow to recap some of our interviews with players and maybe talk about some other things we're looking forward to at the Combine this week. We want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every single day. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider, chat with us directly and get first dibs on Q&A episodes. Follow the link in our show notes. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. We're also on TikTok and Instagram, so check us out there. And also subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.